At 35 years old, Maurice Washington, a police academy trainer in Cleveland, brought home a salary of $58,000 a year. He lived a life of quiet discipline, a reality built from routine, integrity, and a deep, abiding love for his wife, Tiana. He believed this foundation was granite, unshakable. He believed the life they had built in their sprawling Cleveland Heights home, a life he struggled to afford but was proud to provide, was a shared dream. He was wrong. The foundation was sand, and the tide was coming in, a devastating truth that would arrive not with a bang, but with a disconnected phone number on a Tuesday morning. His world, meticulously ordered and proudly maintained, was about to be systematically dismantled by the very person who was supposed to be his partner in its construction. He just didn't know it yet. Their life was a study in contrasts, a delicate ecosystem that Maurice navigated with careful, loving steps. The house on Oakmont Drive in Cleveland Heights, a $450,000 brick colonial Tiana had insisted upon, was her territory. Its polished hardwood floors reflected the light from towering windows, illuminating a life curated from the pages of a magazine. Her influence was in the $3,000 white leather sectional in the living room, the abstract art on the walls that cost more than Maurice's first car, and the gleaming Sub-Zero refrigerator that hummed with a quiet, expensive superiority. Maurice's presence was more subtle, found in the neatly organized tools in the garage, the perfectly edged lawn he mowed every Saturday with their trusty $350 Craftsman mower, and the scent of the coffee he brewed for her every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, using a simple $45 Mr. Coffee machine. Tiana was a force of nature, a rising star in the corporate world. As the newly appointed CEO of a mid-cap logistics firm, she radiated a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Her days were a whirlwind of board meetings and strategic initiatives, a world Maurice only glimpsed through the exhausted but triumphant monologues she'd deliver when she finally walked through the door at 8 p.m. Her deep brown skin, which he had always found so beautiful, seemed to glow differently under the recessed lighting of their kitchen, a luminosity that felt more like a performance than a natural state. She had a closet full of what she called armor, a collection of 8 $700 Armani suits, $200 Jimmy Choo heels, and a formidable lineup of Burberry trench coats, each one a statement of her arrival. Maurice, in contrast, wore the uniform of his profession, simple, functional, and devoid of pretense. His closet held a dozen identical polo shirts bearing the Cleveland Police Academy crest, neatly pressed trousers, and his well-worn $89 Timex watch, a gift from his father. He was a man of substance over style, a philosophy that seemed increasingly quaint in the face of his wife's ambition. He was proud of her, fiercely so, but a quiet unease had begun to settle in his gut. The gap between her world and his was becoming a chasm. It was her newfound devotion to yoga that most clearly illustrated this divide. Starting in January of 2024, Tiana announced that to combat the crushing stress of her new role, she would be attending a series of exclusive yoga retreats in Hilton Head, South Carolina. "It's not a vacation, Maurice," she explained one evening, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the screen. "It's a necessity. My mind has to be sharp. This place, Serenity Now, it's where leaders go to decompress and recalibrate. It's an investment in my performance, which is an investment in us." The first retreat cost $2,500, a charge that appeared on their joint credit card statement. Maurice saw it and flinched. It was more than 2 of his bi-weekly paychecks. "That seems like a lot for some stretching and breathing," he'd said, trying to keep his tone light. Tiana had looked at him with a gaze that was both pitying and dismissive. Her hair was styled in intricate goddess locks, each one a testament to hours spent in a high-end salon. "It's not just stretching, Maurice. It's a holistic wellness experience. Master Kai, the instructor, is world-renowned, Besides, it's a business expense. I can write off a portion of it. You wouldn't understand the kind of pressure I'm under. That phrase, you wouldn't understand, had become a recurring theme, a wall she built between them, brick by condescending brick. He looked at her in her $400 silk pajamas, a stark contrast to his own faded cotton sweats, and felt a profound sense of distance. He tried to bridge it. He researched yoga, watched videos online, and even bought a cheap $20 mat thinking they could do it together. Maybe I could learn some of those moves, he offered. We could do it here, in the living room. She'd given a short, brittle laugh. Oh, honey, that's sweet. But this is different. This is about the environment, the salt air, the collective energy. You can't replicate that in Cleveland Heights. He had no idea how wrong she was about what could be replicated. The lie, it turned out, was very easy to replicate. The cruelty began as a series of paper cuts, small dismissive moments that, over time, bled Maurice of his confidence in their marriage. The outrage was a slow-building fire, each lie another log thrown on the embers. By March, Tiana was planning her second retreat. Maurice, feeling the growing distance between them, made a gentle attempt to reclaim their connection. "Hey, Tiana," he started one Saturday morning, while she was packing a sleek, new, $600 away suitcase. "I was thinking for our anniversary in June, maybe we could take a real trip, just the two of us. I saw a deal for a cabin up by Hocking Hill State Park. We could go hiking, build a fire." He trailed off, seeing the look on her face. She paused, a pair of $300 Lululemon leggings in her hand, and turned to him. The look wasn't just disinterest. It was a profound lack of respect. "A cabin? Maurice, are you listening to yourself? I spend my weeks in glass towers making multi-million-dollar decisions. My idea of a break isn't fighting off mosquitoes in a dusty $150 a night shack. I need rejuvenation. I need the ocean. I need the structured peace of the retreat." She said the word rejuvenation as if it were a sacred text he was incapable of reading. "But we used to love hiking," he said quietly, the memory of their early days feeling like a scene from someone else's life. "We were younger then, Maurice. We had less to worry about," she said, turning back to her bag. "Our lives are different now. My life is different." The implication was clear. Her life had accelerated, and he was still stuck in first gear. The second $2,500 charge hit their account, and Morris felt the sting of it, not in his wallet, but in his heart. She came back from that second trip even more distant, armed with a new vocabulary of wellness and corporate synergy. She talked about mindfulness and paradigm shifts while barely making eye contact. She praised the wisdom of Master Kai, who had apparently given her a new framework for an integrated life. Maurice, a man who trained police recruits on the stark realities of life and death, found himself living with a stranger who spoke in the vague, aspirational language of a self-help guru. The third retreat, in early May, was the one that broke something open, a crack in the facade that let a sliver of ugly light through. She'd been gone for a long weekend, from Thursday to Sunday. Maurice had spent the time cleaning the gutters and fixing the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, small acts of domestic love that felt increasingly futile. When the credit card statement was updated online, he saw the usual charges. The $2,500 for Serenity Now Yoga, the airline ticket, the rental car, but this time there was something else. A charge for $412.87 at a restaurant called the Porter and Pig, a high-end gastropub in Hilton Head. He knew Tiana's retreat diet. She had described it in detail. Vegan, gluten-free, no alcohol. It was all part of the cleanse. A $412 steakhouse dinner didn't fit. He waited until she was home, relaxed, and sipping a glass of expensive wine, a $90 bottle of Cabernet she'd started keeping on hand for post-retreat integration. He approached it casually, trying not to sound accusatory. "Hey, looks like you had a nice dinner in Hilton Head," he said, gesturing to the credit card app on his phone. "The porter and pig? I thought you guys were on a strict vegan diet at the retreat." She didn't even look up from her iPad, where she was reviewing what looked like a corporate report. "Oh, a group of us went out on the last night. It was a networking thing, a celebration for completing the program. A big group? For a $400 bill?" He pressed gently. This time she looked at him, and her eyes were cold. "Maurice, do you have to audit every single line item? It was me, a few of the other executives, and Devin was there. You know, my CFO. He was in town for a conference. We linked up. It's all work, baby, building team cohesion. You bill it to the company. It's just how it's done." "You billed it to our joint account," he said, the words tasting like ash. She sighed, a dramatic, put-upon exhalation. "And I will pay you back for it from my expense report if it makes you feel better. Honestly, the way you scrutinize every dollar, it's suffocating. This is why I need these retreats, to get away from this nickel-and-dime mentality." She stood up, taking her wine glass with her. "I'm going to take a bath. My muscles are still sore from the advanced vinyasa flow." He stood alone in the kitchen, the glow of his phone screen illuminating the 41287 charge. Devin, her CFO. A man she had described as brilliant but intense, a married man. It wasn't the money. It was the ease of the lie, the casual cruelty of her dismissal. It was the word suffocating echoing in the cavernous, silent kitchen. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The embers of outrage were beginning to glow hot. He had no idea what was coming, but he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the life he thought he had was already over. The end of his marriage began on a Tuesday morning, June 10th at 8:47 a.m. It was their 8th wedding anniversary. Maurice was at his desk in his small, functional office at the Cleveland Police Academy in Tremont. The room smelled of industrial-strength coffee and floor polish. A stack of recruit evaluation forms sat neatly on one corner of his desk, but he was ignoring them. He was engaged in a mission of hope, a secret operation designed to salvage the wreckage he felt his marriage was becoming. He had the joint credit card statement open on his monitor. There they were, the 3 charges from 2024, lined up like soldiers of deceit. January 15th, March 22nd, May 10th. Each one for $2,500, each one coded to Serenity Now Yoga High. He was going to turn her weapon against herself. His plan was simple, born of a desperate, romantic optimism. He would call the studio, book a private anniversary weekend for the two of them, and surprise Tiana with it. He would show her he could embrace her world. He would prove he could be the kind of man who understood rejuvenation and salt air. He imagined the look on her face, the surprise, the softening of her features. He imagined they could find their way back. He found the website easily. It was simple, elegant, full of photos of serene-looking people doing yoga on a sun-drenched beach. The phone number was listed at the bottom of the page. He took a deep breath the way he taught recruits to do before a high-stress tactical exercise, and dialed. The phone rang once, then twice, before being replaced by a strange triple-tone beep and a recorded voice. "The number you have dialed, 843-5501-82, has been disconnected. No further information is available." He frowned. That was odd. A technical glitch, probably. He redialed, checking the numbers carefully. Same result. Disconnected. A flicker of annoyance turned into a small, cold seed of unease. Why would an exclusive, high-end retreat have a disconnected phone number? He went back to the website. He looked for an alternative number, a contact email, anything. There was nothing but a simple contact form. He navigated to the About Us page. It featured a glowing biography of the founder, a woman named Anjali, and her philosophy of integrative peace. It was all very professional. He then did something he did with every recruit's background check. He started a new, wider search. He typed Serenity Now Yoga Hilton Head into the search bar. The first few results were the studio's own website and some travel blogs that mentioned it. But the fifth result was different. It was from the Island Packet, Hilton Head's local newspaper. The headline, dated August 15, 2022, read, Local Wellness Pioneer Retires. Serenity Now Yoga Studio to close its doors. Maurice clicked the link. His heart began to beat a slow, heavy drum against his ribs. The article was a short, fond farewell to the studio and its owner. It detailed the studio's history and its beloved place in the community, and it stated unequivocally that Serenity Now Yoga had permanently closed its doors to the public over a year and a half ago. August 2022. He stared at the screen, the words blurring. 2022. He toggled back to the credit card statement. 2024. The dates didn't line up. It wasn't possible. The room, which a moment ago had been warm and familiar, suddenly felt cold and alien. The air grew thin. His training kicked in, overriding the surge of raw, personal emotion. He was no longer a husband. He was an investigator. The objective was to gather facts, to eliminate possibilities, to build a case. He pulled up the detailed online statements for the joint credit card, going back to January. He ignored the line item descriptions and focused on the raw data. The first retreat in January. The $2,500 charge was there, but so were others from the same weekend. A charge from the Marriott Hilton Head Resort for $180. A charge from Delta Airlines for 2 round-trip tickets from Cleveland to Savannah, booked on the same itinerary, for $856. The Porter and Pig dinner for $4 all booked on their joint card. He moved to March. The same pattern. The fraudulent $2,500 yoga charge, followed by a 3-night stay at the same Marriott, 2 more plane tickets, and a series of smaller charges, a beachfront bar, a fancy brunch spot. Then, May. The same Marriott, the same 2 airline tickets, the same pattern of deception, repeated with an arrogance that made his stomach clench. 3 trips, 3 lies, 6 plane tickets. Who was the second passenger? The name from the dinner receipt echoed in his mind. Devon. He sat back in his chair, the squeak of the cheap vinyl loud in the sudden silence of his world. The hope he had felt just 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty that felt like a block of ice forming in his chest. It was organized. It was methodical. It was a conspiracy not just against him, but against the financial partnership of their marriage. She hadn't just cheated on him. She had embezzled from their life together, using their shared funds to finance her betrayal, and then lied to his face about it with a casual, cruel smile. The worst part was her justification, her condescending speeches about wellness and pressure, turning her lies into a weapon to make him feel small and inadequate. At 8:47 a.m., he had been a hopeful husband. By 9:07 a.m., he was a man with a case file and a target. The temperature in the room hadn't changed, but Maurice Washington had become a very cold man. His anniversary surprise was ruined, but he realized he had just received a gift of a different kind. The unvarnished, brutal truth. And with the truth came a new, chilling sense of purpose. The days that followed the discovery were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Maurice the man was reeling. His heart felt like a shattered piece of glass in his chest. But Maurice, the trainer of police officers, knew that the most critical phase of any operation was the period immediately after a shocking event. It was a time for observation, for evidence gathering, for feigning normalcy, while the enemy believed they still held the advantage. He had to play dumb. That evening, he walked into the Cleveland Heights house, and the smell of roasted garlic hit him. Tiana was in the kitchen, a rare occurrence. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost $500 and stirring something in a pot. She smiled at him, a bright, artificial smile that he now saw for the performance it was. "Hey, baby," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I thought I'd make dinner tonight. Celebrating our anniversary a little early?" He felt a wave of nausea. He had to force his face into a mask of placid affection. "That's great, honey. Smells amazing." He walked over and kissed her on the cheek. Her skin was warm, but all he could feel was the icy chill of her deception. He had to fight the urge to recoil. They sat at their $4,000 oak dining table, eating a $150 rack of lamb she'd had delivered from a gourmet butcher. She talked about her day, about a difficult negotiation, about the incompetence of her marketing department. He nodded and made the appropriate noises. He was an actor in a play he was desperate to end. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "all this stress at work is making me think I need to book another session at Serenity now. Maybe in August. The summer session with Master Kai is supposed to be life-changing." It took every ounce of his discipline not to react. He just took a slow sip of water, his hand steady. A miracle of muscle memory. "Oh yeah? Sounds nice," he said, his voice a neutral, flat landscape. Inside he was screaming. The audacity was breathtaking. She was planning the next illicit trip right in front of him, using a fictional guru as her cover. She made a critical mistake. She underestimated him completely. The next night was their official anniversary dinner. She had made reservations at a trendy, impossibly expensive restaurant downtown where a single entree cost more than his weekly grocery budget. She presented him with a small, heavy box. Inside was a watch, a gleaming Tag Heuer worth at least $3,000. It was a beautiful, extravagant lie. "Happy anniversary, baby," she said, her eyes shining with what he now understood was not love, but the thrill of manipulation. "You work so hard. You deserve something nice." The irony was a physical blow. She was buying him off with their own money, money she was simultaneously siphoning off to fund her affair. He had gotten her a simple, framed photo of them from their wedding day, a candid shot where they were both laughing, their faces full of a hope that now seemed tragic. He handed it to her. "Oh," she said, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second as she looked at the image of their younger, happier selves. "That's sweet, Morris." She placed it on the table, next to the bread basket, and didn't look at it again for the rest of the meal. He felt nothing but a cold, clarifying calm. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a crime scene, and he was the lead investigator. The final piece of his initial evidence gathering happened that weekend. He found Tiana in her home office, a room that looked more like a CEO's suite, complete with a $5,000 ergonomic chair and a view of their manicured backyard. He leaned against the doorframe, projecting an air of casual curiosity. "Hey, Tiana, quick question for work," he began, using the pretext he'd devised. "I'm writing up a new ethics scenario for the recruits, and I want to make it realistic. At your company, for the senior execs like you and, say, Devin, do you guys have to sign, like, a morals clause or a code of conduct agreement?" She looked up from her laptop, momentarily annoyed by the interruption. "A code of conduct? Of course, Maurice. It's an ironclad part of our employment contract. Section 4, Executive Responsibility and Public Decorum." "Why?" "Just trying to get the details right," he said, shrugging. "So what would happen if, hypothetically, an executive violated it, like by misusing company funds or having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate or another executive?" She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "They'd be fired, immediately, for cause. No severance, no stock options, nothing. The board has zero tolerance for that kind of liability. It could damage the brand and affect the stock price. Is that realistic enough for your little scenario?" "Perfect," he said, a thin smile on his lips. That's exactly what I needed, thanks. He walked away from her office, the information he needed now complete. She had just handed him the weapon and the instruction manual for her own destruction. She had no idea that the little scenario he was writing was her life, and the ending was going to be brutal. The phase of playing dumb was over. The time for strategic action had begun. The following Monday at 1:15 p.m., Maurice walked into a coffee shop on Lexington Avenue, a neutral location far from his home and his work. The air smelled of burnt espresso and sugar. He scanned the room and saw his cousin, Damari Washington, sitting in a booth in the back. Damari was 2 years younger than Morris, but he moved with the gravitas of a man twice his age. He was an attorney, but not just any attorney. He specialized in officer conduct cases, a niche field that required a deep understanding of institutional rules, evidence, and the cold, hard mechanics of accountability. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost $2,000, a stark contrast to Morris's simple Academy polo shirt. "Morris," Damari said, his voice a low baritone. He didn't stand, just gestured to the seat opposite him. There were 2 coffees on the table. He had remembered how Maurice took his black. "Damari, thanks for meeting me," Maurice said, sliding into the booth. "Your text sounded urgent," Damari said, his eyes, sharp and analytical, scanning Maurice's face. "You said it was personal, but that I needed to treat it like a case. So, what's the case?" Maurice took a deep breath. He opened the worn leather briefcase he'd carried since his own academy days, a $150 item that had served him well for over a decade. He pulled out a single manila folder and slid it across the table. "The defendant is my wife, Tiana Washington. The charge is extensive." Damari opened the folder. He was silent for a long time. Maurice watched his cousin's face as he processed the information. Damari's expression didn't change, but Maurice could see the subtle shift in his posture, the way his focus sharpened. He was no longer a cousin offering comfort. He was a lawyer assessing a claim. Inside the folder was everything. The printouts of the credit card statements, with the fraudulent Serenity Now charges highlighted in yellow. The corresponding Marriott Hotel folios, which Maurice had obtained by calling the hotel's corporate rewards line, claiming he had lost his receipts for a business trip. He'd simply provided the dates and Tiana's name, and the unsuspecting agent had emailed them right over. The folios clearly showed 1 king bed booked under Devon's name, with a guest count of 2 adults. The flight itineraries from Delta, showing Tiana Washington and Devon Albright booked on the same flights, their seat numbers adjacent. The printout of the newspaper article from 2022 announcing the closure of the yoga studio. It was a clean, irrefutable chain of evidence. Damari read through every page, his finger tracing a line of numbers. He set down the hotel folio for the May trip. "A 1-bedroom suite with an ocean view? $580 a night," he murmured, more to himself than to Maurice. He picked up the restaurant receipt. The Porter and Pig, $412. They had the tomahawk steak for 2, and 2 bottles of the Orange Swift Papillon. He looked up at Morris. "This isn't just sloppy. This is arrogant." "She thinks I'm an idiot," Maurice said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She thinks I'm too simple to look, and too stupid to understand if I did." "She's made a critical error," Damari said, closing the folder. "This isn't just a marital issue, Morris. This is a corporate one. She's the CEO. He's the CFO. They use joint marital funds, which is bad for her in a divorce. But they traveled together on days she claimed were for a fraudulent purpose and likely discussed business or, at the very least, created a massive liability for their company. Her employment contract, did you get a copy?" "I know the clause," Maurice said. "Section 4, executive responsibility and public decorum. Fired for cause. No severance. Forfeiture of stock options." Damari's lips curved into a slight, cold smile. Good. You did your homework. This is clean. We don't go to her. We don't go to him. We go directly to the board of directors. We present this not as a husband's complaint, but as a shareholder's concern, brought by an interested party. You, as her husband, are an interested party whose finances were used in the commission of this fraud. What's the plan? Maurice asked. The plan is a coordinated strike, Damari said, his voice dropping. I will draft a formal letter to the chairman of the board. I'll request a 5-minute slot at the next board meeting, citing a matter of urgent corporate governance. I will prepare 7 binders, 1 for each board member. Inside each binder will be copies of everything in this folder, neatly tabulated. I will present the facts, cite the specific clause in her contract, and then I will sit down. And then? And then we let the consequences play out, Damari said. They will have no choice. To ignore this would be to open themselves up to shareholder lawsuits. They will terminate both of them to protect the company. It will be swift and it will be brutal. He paused, looking at Maurice intently. This is the path you want to take. There is no coming back from this. Maurice thought of the condescending smiles, the dismissive laughs, the word suffocating. He thought of the $3,000 watch on his wrist, a bribe disguised as a gift. He thought of the ghost of Master Kai, a fiction used to mock him. This is the path, Maurice said. Good, Damari said. He pushed a document across the table. It was his firm's standard retainer agreement. My fee is $200 an hour. I'll need a $5,000 retainer to begin. We will add my legal fees to the divorce settlement. She'll end up paying for this too. Maurice pulled a certified check from his jacket pocket. He had liquidated a small mutual fund he'd been building for a decade, his rainy day fund. It was raining. He slid the $5,000 check across the table. Damari picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in his breast pocket. The transaction was complete. The war had been declared, and the general had just been hired. The strike was scheduled for Tuesday, 1 week after Maurice's meeting with Damari. The company's quarterly board meeting was at 10 a.m. Maurice would not be there. His role was complete. He was the client. Damari was the instrument. That morning, Maurice went to work at the academy as usual. He ran a physical training session with a new class of recruits, his voice sharp and clear as he called out cadences. He was a portrait of professional calm, but his mind was miles away, in a glass tower downtown. At 10:05 a.m., Damari Washington, looking immaculate in a dark navy suit that cost more than Maurice's mortgage payment, walked into the boardroom of Apex Logistics. The room was exactly as Maurice had imagined it. A long, polished mahogany table, 12 high-backed leather chairs, and a floor-to-ceiling window offering a panoramic view of Cleveland. The air was cool and smelled of money. Tiana was seated at the head of the table, the seat of power. She was wearing a brilliant white Alexander McQueen pantsuit, an $8,700 statement of authority. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, severe bun. She looked every inch the powerful CEO. Next to her sat Devin Albright, the CFO, his face a mask of corporate seriousness in his own expensive suit. They were in the middle of a presentation on quarterly earnings. The board chairman, a man named Arthur Vance, a stern-looking man in his late 60s, held up a hand. Thank you, Devin. We'll pause there. We have a brief addition to the agenda. Mr. Damari Washington, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes. Tiana's head snapped up. She looked from Vance to Damari, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She didn't know him. Devin frowned, annoyed at the interruption. Damari walked to the center of the room, carrying a slim leather portfolio. He placed 7 identical, thick, spiral-bound binders on the table. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Damari Washington. I am an attorney with the firm of Washington and Associates. I am here today on behalf of my client, Mr. Maurice Washington. He paused to let the name land. Tiana's face went white. It was a sudden, shocking absence of color, as if all the blood had drained from her head. Her confident posture dissolved. She shrank in her chair, her $8,700 suit suddenly looking like a costume. Devin froze, his pen hovering over a notepad. His eyes darted from Damari to Tiana and back again. The carefully constructed reality of the room had just shattered. "My client," Damari continued, his voice calm and measured, "is the husband of your chief executive officer, Tiana Washington." He gestured to the binders. "In the interest of time, I have prepared a summary of a matter of urgent corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility. If you would please open the binders to tab 1. There was a rustle of paper as the 6 board members, their faces a mixture of curiosity and alarm, opened the binders. Vance was already flipping through the pages, his expression grim. "Tab 1, Damari said, his voice echoing slightly in the stunned silence, "is a summary of 3 trips taken by Mr. Albright and your CEO, Tiana Washington, to Hilton Head, South Carolina, in January, March, and May of this year. Tab 2 contains the corresponding joint credit card statements from my client's account, showing 3 charges of $2,500 each coded to a business named Serenity Now Yoga." Tiana made a small, choking sound. Devin looked like he had been turned to stone. "As you will see in tab 3, Damari went on, his pacing flawless, we have included a certified copy of a news article from the Island Packet newspaper, dated August 20,000, Sad Island Dallas 2022, confirming that the Serenity Now Yoga Studio has been permanently closed for nearly 2 years. The charges are fraudulent." A board member, a woman with severe gray hair, gasped softly. Tabs 4 and 5 contain the flight itineraries and hotel folios for these 3 trips. You will note that Mr. Albright and Mr. Washington traveled together on all 3 occasions. You will also note that they shared a single hotel room at the Marriott Hilton Head Resort on all 3 occasions. The funds for these trips were, in part, drawn from my client's personal finances via a joint credit card, under the false pretense of being a legitimate, deductible wellness expense for your CEO. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Tiana was staring at the table, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Devin was sweating, a bead of perspiration tracing a path down his temple. "Finally, if you will turn to tab 6, Damari said, his voice hardening slightly, "I have taken the liberty of including the relevant section of your own corporate bylaws, specifically Section 4.1.3 of the Executive Code of Conduct, which prohibits conduct that brings the company into disrepute, including but not limited to financial impropriety or the creation of a hostile or compromised work environment through inappropriate personal relationships between executives." He looked directly at Arthur Vance. "My client believes this evidence speaks for itself. The potential liability for this corporation, should this information become public in a different context, is significant. We are offering you the opportunity to handle this matter internally with the swiftness and discretion it requires." He closed his portfolio. "That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time." He turned and walked out of the boardroom without a backward glance. He didn't need to stay. The bomb had been deployed with surgical precision. The fallout was now their problem. Arthur Vance looked at Tiana, his face a mask of cold fury. "Tiana, Devin, please wait outside." The door clicked shut behind them, leaving them standing in the silent, opulent hallway. The strike was over. It had taken less than 5 minutes. The execution was complete. The consequences cascaded with brutal, systematic efficiency. For Tiana and Devin, The life they knew was over before Damari's car had even left the parking garage. The downfall was not a slow crumble. It was a demolition. First, the board. After Tiana and Devin were sent out of the room, the discussion was brief and unanimous. The evidence was irrefutable. Their actions represented a catastrophic failure of judgment and a direct violation of their contracts. By 10:30 a.m., the board had voted to terminate both of them, for cause, effective immediately. Arthur Vance, the chairman, delivered the news himself in the hallway. He was not unkind, but he was firm. They were to collect their personal belongings from their offices under the supervision of security and vacate the premises immediately. Their corporate credit cards were deactivated while they were still standing there. For Tiana, the financial devastation was absolute. Her termination for cause meant she lost everything she had spent the last decade building. Her $450,000 annual salary vanished. Her performance bonus for the year, projected to be over $200,000, was nullified. Most painfully, her $1.2 million in unvested stock options, the cornerstone of her future wealth, evaporated into thin air. Her severance package was exactly $0. She walked out of the building she once commanded carrying a single cardboard box with a few personal photos and a potted orchid. Her $8,700 pantsuit now looking like a cruel joke. For Devin, the fallout was just as swift. His $320,000 salary was gone. His own stock options, worth around $600,000, were forfeited. But for him, the consequences went further. When he arrived home that evening to his own sprawling home in Shaker Heights, a broken man, he confessed everything to his wife. She was a prominent surgeon, a woman with her own power and a zero-tolerance policy for betrayal. She filed for divorce the very next day, her attorney citing Devin's affair as the primary cause. He would lose his job, his wife, and half of his remaining assets in one fell swoop. Then came the messages to Morris. The first one arrived at 11:15 a.m., just as Maurice was finishing his lunch, a simple turkey sandwich on whole wheat that cost him $1.50 to make. It was a text from Tiana. "Call me, now." He ignored it. The second message, a voicemail, came at 11:45 a.m. Her voice was tight with controlled rage. "Maurice, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you have made a catastrophic mistake. You have involved yourself in my business, and you are going to regret it. You need to call me this instant, and we are going to fix the mess you've made." He deleted it without saving. The third message arrived at 1:30 p.m. The anger was gone, replaced by a note of rising panic. "Maurice, please pick up the phone. I've been let go. They fired me because of what your cousin said. This is a misunderstanding. We need to talk. We can fix this. Just call me." He continued grading recruit papers. The fourth message at 4 p.m. was pure pleading. Her voice was thick with tears. "Baby, please. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But please don't do this to us. To me, everything is gone. My job, my reputation. It's all gone. Please, just talk to me. I love you." The "I love you" felt like the final, most desperate lie. He felt nothing. Finally, Damari's office filed for divorce that afternoon. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and made a claim for a disproportionate share of the marital assets, specifically the $450,000 house, on the grounds that marital funds had been flagrantly used to finance infidelity, a fact now well documented. Given Tiana's sudden lack of income and the egregious nature of her actions, Damari was confident the court would award the house to Maurice. The equity, roughly $150,000, would be his. Tiana, the woman who had scoffed at his simple life, would walk away with her designer clothes, her expensive car that was leased, and nothing else. The story was contained for 48 hours. Then it leaked. A small business blog got the scoop. Apex Logistics CEO and CFO abruptly fired amidst rumors of misconduct. The company's stock dipped 4%, a loss of millions in shareholder value, all because of a series of lies about a yoga retreat that never existed. The consequences had their own momentum now, a cascade of ruin that was entirely of their own making. Maurice simply stood back and watched the structure they had built collapse under the weight of its own corruption. 6 months later, the Cleveland winter had given way to a bright, crisp spring. The house on Oakmont Drive felt different. It was quieter, calmer. The imposing $3,000 white leather sectional was gone, sold to a consignment shop for a fraction of its price. In its place was Morris's old, comfortable armchair and a simple, sturdy sofa he'd bought for $800 from a local furniture store. The abstract art was gone, replaced by framed photographs of his family and commendations from his years at the academy. The house was no longer a showroom. It was a home. His home. The divorce had been finalized, and as Damari predicted, the judge had awarded him the house outright. Tiana had moved into a small, rented apartment across town. Maurice's life had also found a new, more meaningful structure. He stood before a class of 25 fresh-faced police recruits in a lecture hall at the Tremont Academy. The room was silent, every eye on him. His salary had received a modest bump to $68,000, a recognition of the value he was bringing. Integrity, Maurice said, his voice steady and clear, is not something you have when people are watching. It's what you do when you think no one is looking. It's the internal affairs of your own life. He clicked a button, and a new slide appeared on the screen behind him. It was a redacted case study. It showed credit card statements with blacked-out names, hotel folios, and excerpts from a corporate code of conduct. Case Study 4B, he announced. The subject, a high-level executive, believed their personal actions were separate from their professional responsibilities. They created a complex web of deceit to hide a personal indiscretion, using company resources and reputation as a shield. They underestimated the person they were deceiving, believing them to be unobservant and incapable of action. This was their critical error. He walked them through the evidence, the pattern of deception, the arrogance, the inevitable discovery. He didn't use names. He didn't need to. The story was a powerful lesson in cause and effect. The recruits were riveted, scribbling notes. He was teaching them not just how to be police officers, but how to be people of substance. He was turning his pain into a curriculum, his personal tragedy into a public service. The epilogue of his old life had one final chapter. Tiana had called him a month ago, asking to meet. He agreed, meeting her at the same coffee shop where he had first hired Damari. She looked smaller, diminished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She cried, she apologized. A real apology this time, full of shame and regret. She was working a mid-level marketing job, trying to rebuild. He listened patiently. He didn't feel anger anymore, just a profound sense of sadness for the woman she had become and the woman she could have been. I forgive you, Tiana, he said, and he meant it. I forgive you for my own peace, not for your comfort. But there is no going back. He paid for her coffee and walked away, the finality of it settling around him like a calm, quiet dusk. The final scene of his new life took place on a Saturday. The sun was brilliant, the air was warm. He drove his paid-off 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it to a shooting range on the outskirts of the city. He put on his safety glasses and ear protection. He loaded the magazine into his service pistol with practiced, steady hands. He wasn't there out of anger or a need for aggression. This was his new meditation. It was about breath control, focus, and precision. It was about hitting exactly what you were aiming for. He raised the pistol, aligned the sights on the distant paper target, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was clean, precise, right in the center. He didn't feel triumph, just a quiet, satisfying sense of control. He was the master of his own life, his own integrity. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in stock options or designer suits, but in the peace that comes from living an honest life. True power wasn't about commanding a boardroom. It was about the quiet, unshakable strength of your own character. And in the warm Cleveland sun, surrounded by the smell of gunpowder and the promise of a peaceful afternoon, Morris Washington finally felt truly, authentically rich.